Hello everyone, it's such a pleasure to be here with you all today. We've got a great conversation ahead, so let's dive right in. I recently had a bit of an unexpected adventure in the kitchen. I was preparing a dish for a community gathering, hearty black bean chili. That's a family favorite here in Texas. Black beans are such a staple in many of my recipes because they're packed with protein, fiber, and a deep, earthy flavor that's just irreplaceable. This particular chili is something I make often, especially when we have big gatherings. It's warming, nourishing, and just perfect for feeding a crowd. I was halfway through the prep when I realized I was completely out of black beans. It was quite the situation, especially since the chili's rich, smoky base relies heavily on them. Black beans are incredibly popular here in Texas. They're a key ingredient in dishes like black bean soup, refried beans, and even in salads or as a side dish. They're known for their smooth texture and slightly sweet, mild flavor, which pairs wonderfully with both spices and fresh herbs. With the black bean shortage, I had to think on my feet. Instead of substituting with a different bean, I decided to change the texture and flavor profile of the dish entirely. I roasted some root vegetables I had on hand, carrots, sweet potatoes, and beets, to bring in a deep caramelized sweetness to the chili. I also added some smoky chipotle peppers to enhance the depth of flavor. The result was a bit different from the traditional black bean chili, but it turned out to be a hit. The roasted vegetables added a nice contrast in texture, and the smoky heat from the chipotle tied it all together.
Wow, Jennifer, that's such an inventive approach. I love the idea of using roasted root vegetables. Did you find that the texture was as satisfying as the black beans usually are?
Thanks, Sarah. The texture was definitely different, but in a good way. The roasted vegetables had a slightly chewy exterior with a tender inside, which contrasted nicely with the other elements in the chili. It wasn't quite the same as the creaminess of black beans, but it added a unique twist that everyone enjoyed.
I'm so impressed, Jennifer. The way you adapted to the shortage is inspiring. I'm curious, did the roasting process take much longer? And how did it affect the overall timing of the dish?
That's a great question, Emily. Roasting the vegetables did add some extra time, but I was able to do it while prepping the other ingredients, so it didn't delay the cooking too much. The key was to cut the vegetables into small, uniform pieces so they cooked quickly and evenly.
Jennifer, your creativity in the kitchen never ceases to amaze me. I'm wondering, did you serve the chili with any particular sides or toppings to complement the new flavors you introduced?
Thank you, Maya. I served it with some freshly made cornbread and a dollop of Greek yogurt on top, which added a nice creaminess. The sweetness of the cornbread paired really well with the roasted vegetables and smoky chili.
Jennifer, your resourcefulness is so inspiring. I can only imagine how delicious the chili turned out. I'm curious about the chipotle peppers. Did you use them fresh or were they canned? And did you find that they balanced well with the roasted vegetables?
Thanks, Chloe. I used canned chipotle peppers in adobo sauce. Their smoky flavor was a perfect match for the roasted vegetables, adding the depth that tied the dish together. The heat was just enough to complement the sweetness of the vegetables without overpowering them.
I totally agree with you, Chloe. When it comes to buying black beans, I think the first thing to consider is the quality of the beans themselves. In Florida, I always look for beans that are firm and smooth, without any cracks or discoloration. It's a sign that they've been stored properly and will cook evenly. I usually buy them from local farmers markets where I know they've been harvested recently. Freshness is key for achieving that perfect creamy texture in dishes like soups or fried beans.
Absolutely, Maya. I also add that sourcing organic black beans is really important, especially here in California, where we have a strong focus on organic farming. Organic beans are grown without synthetic pesticides or fertilizers, which not only makes them healthier, but also supports sustainable farming practices. Plus, I find that organic black beans have a richer flavor, which really enhances dishes like black bean salad or chili.
I couldn't agree more, Sarah. Another key consideration is the origin of the beans. In Texas, I like to support local growers, and I always check if the beans are grown in the state. Locally sourced beans are often fresher, and you're supporting the local economy at the same time. Plus, they're usually better suited to our regional dishes, like Texas-style black bean soup.
That's such a good point, Jennifer. For me, storage is another critical factor. In Washington, where it can be quite damp, I always look for beans that are sold in airtight, moisture-proof packaging. This helps prevent them from becoming stale or developing mold. When I get them home, I store them in a cool, dry place to maintain their freshness for as long as possible. Proper storage really makes a difference in the quality of the beans, especially when I'm using them in dishes like black bean brownies or a hearty stew.
I love all these tips. Another thing to consider is the size and variety of the beans. In New York, I've noticed that some black beans are larger and firmer, while others are smaller and softer. Depending on what I'm making, I choose the size that will best complement the dish. For example, I prefer smaller beans for soups, where they blend in more smoothly, but larger ones are great for salads or as a standalone side dish. Understanding the differences in size and variety can really elevate your cooking.
In California, when I'm out of black beans, I'd often turn to pinto beans as an alternative. They're similar in texture, but have a slightly creamier taste. I've used them in everything from burritos to bean salads, and they work beautifully. However, I do find that pinto beans have a milder flavor compared to the deep earthiness of black beans, so I usually add a bit more spice to balance it out.
That's a great choice, Sarah. Here in Texas, I sometimes use kidney beans when I can't get black beans. They have a hearty texture and hold up well in chili or soups. The main difference I've noticed is that kidney beans have a more pronounced flavor, which can sometimes overpower the other ingredients. So, I tend to use them in recipes where they're not the main star, but rather part of the mix.
Up in Washington, I often use navy beans as an alternative. They're smaller and have a smooth, creamy texture that works well in soups and stews. The biggest difference is their mild flavor, which isn't as bold as black beans. They compensate. I usually add more herbs and spices to bring out the depth of the dish.
In Florida, I found that black-eyed peas can be a good substitute for black beans. They're slightly different in taste, with a bit of a nuttier flavor. And they're also softer in texture. I love using them in salads or even a curry. The main thing to watch out for is that they cook faster than black beans, so you have to keep an eye on them to avoid overcooking.
Here in New York, I've sometimes used lentils as a substitute. They cook quickly and have a similar texture when cooked, though they don't have the same depth of flavor as black beans. Lentils are great in soups and salads, but because they're so small, they can sometimes get lost in a dish that's meant to have more substance. I usually add them to dishes where they can shine in a supporting role rather than the main ingredient.
This has been such an enriching discussion. We've covered a lot of ground, from my black bean chili adventure to the various criteria for choosing the best black beans, and even explored some creative alternatives. I've truly enjoyed hearing all your insights and learning from your experiences. Thank you, Sarah, Maya, Emily, and Chloe, for sharing your expertise and making this conversation so lively and informative. And to all our viewers, thank you for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion helpful and that you're inspired to experiment with black beans, or any beans, in your own cooking. Until next time, take care and happy cooking.